Every legend hides a truth. Every myth whispers a warning. Welcome to the Mythic Hour, where the forgotten gods and cursed stories return to life. They say the mightiest chains are not forged of iron, nor bound with fire, but woven by fate itself. Kings fall to them. Titans bow before them. Even gods, crowned in thunder, cannot break them. And so it is told of Zeus, lord of the sky, the thunderer, the king of Olympus, who feared nothing in heaven or on earth, yet found himself hunted by a curse no lightning bolt could shatter. His throne gleamed eternal, his storms shook the world, but the shadow of fate stalked him in silence, and what he ruled, he could never truly keep. They say the mightiest chains are not forged of iron, nor bound with fire, but spun from thread. Invisible, delicate, unbreakable. Such threads bind kings as tightly as slaves, titans as surely as mortals. For above all thrones and temples, beyond the stars themselves, sits the loom of the Moirai, the Fates. It is there, in a chamber where no sun rises and no shadow falls, that the world is woven. Clotho spins the threads of all who live, Lachesis measures their course, and Atropos, stern, silent, cuts them when the hour comes. Every birth, every triumph, every death, is no more than a line of thread upon their tapestry. Not even the gods escape. And so it is told of Zeus, the thunderer, the king of Olympus, master of storms and ruler of heaven and earth. Of all the gods, none shone brighter, none struck more fear, none wielded greater power. His throne was eternal, his dominion unmatched. Yet it is whispered that Zeus bore a shadow deeper than any titan's prison, darker than any mortal grave, a curse not of chains, but of eternity. His thunderbolts could split mountains, his storms could drown armies, but none of his weapons could strike against fate. This is the tale of Zeus and his curse. A story not of conquest, but of sorrow. Not of triumph, but of torment. The tale of a god who could not be broken, and yet could never be free. The sky rippled with thunder. Lightning laced the clouds in silver veins, striking mountain peaks until they glowed like molten crowns. Below, in the marble halls of Olympus, the gods gathered. The council chamber of the immortals was a vast circle, its ceiling open to the heavens so that stormlight poured within. 12 thrones of gold and ivory rose in a ring, each one gleaming with the essence of its divine occupant. The air hummed with the scent of ambrosia and the faint music of Apollo's lyre, though today the song was stilled, waiting. At the center stood Zeus. His crown, wrought from the flame of lightning itself, burned upon his brow. In one hand, he held his thunderbolt, gleaming, deadly, alive. His form towered above the others, broad-shouldered, crowned in stormlight, his voice carrying the weight of the sky itself. He had summoned them all, Athena with her bright spear and unreadable eyes, Apollo radiant with golden hair, Hermes, restless and smirking at the edge of his throne, Poseidon, sea-brined and grim, leaning upon his trident, Demeter crowned with harvest, silent and watchful, and Hera, his queen, seated at his right hand, her beauty terrible, her expression unreadable. They had gathered to hear his words. Zeus's gaze swept the council like a storm scanning the horizon. The world trembles, yet Olympus endures. He began, his voice rolling like thunder. Mortals rise, build their palaces, then fall to dust. Giants break their spears against our mountains. Even the Titans, who once reigned before us, lie shackled in the abyss. And who holds the scepter of their defeat? Who rules the heavens and the earth alike? He raised the thunderbolt, and the chamber flared with white fire. The walls shook, the marble cracked, yet no god dared move. I do, Zeus thundered. I am Zeus, breaker of Chronos, king eternal. No power binds me. No curse shall touch me. Not the wrath of the dead, nor the envy of gods, nor the vengeance of time. I am unshaken, unyielding, ruler of heaven and earth. A silence followed, deep and uneasy. Some gods cried out in praise, Ars, pounding his spear against the floor, Apollo, whose lyre strings trembled in agreement. Hermes smirked, whispering, he does love a speech. Athena's eyes narrowed, though she said nothing. Hera's lips curved into a smile that was not a smile at all. For pride dripped from every word, and pride has a sound the heavens cannot bear. Far above Olympus, beyond the stars and storms, three figures stirred. The Moirai. Clotho, the spinner, fingers white with thread. Lachesis, the measurer, her gaze long and cold. Atropos, the cutter, silent, her shears glinting with a light sharper than lightning. They bent over the golden thread that was Zeus's life. Stronger than any mortals, brighter than any gods, it shone like a sun. For a time they had left it untouched, fearing his thunder. But arrogance is the music of doom, and his voice had reached even them. He boasts too loudly, murmured Clotho, twisting her spindle. His reign stretches too long, whispered Lachesis, her rod of measure quivering. Atropos tilted her shears. For a moment, the loom itself seemed to hold its breath. Then she smiled faintly. Not a cut. Not yet. Something worse. They wove a shadow into the golden thread, a curse spun so fine it would not snap the line of his reign, but twist it forever. His throne would not fall. Oh no, it would endure, bright as the storm. But his victories would be hollow, his loves would curdle into loss, his children would rise not as heirs but as wounds. The curse was sealed. And far below, Zeus laughed, drinking deep from a goblet of nectar, blind to the shadow now crawling upon the thread of his destiny. The loom of the fates spun on. What had once been a shining, unbroken thread now twisted with shadows. The curse did not strike in a thunderclap. It crept, quiet as nightfall, weaving sorrow into the lives of all who drew near to Zeus. The thunderer did not notice. Why would he? His gaze was fixed upon beauty, his heart quick to hunger, his hand quicker still to claim. Mortal queens, nymphs, even goddesses, none could resist the storm when Zeus descended in his glory. But though his passion burned bright, it left behind only ashes. The curse worked through love. And it began with Semele. Semele, daughter of Cadmus of Thebes, was radiant as dawn. Her laughter was like water spilling over stone, her hair dark as river shadows, her eyes as bright as a summer sky. Zeus saw her by chance, if chance it can be called, when she walked the banks of the Asopus River, a wreath of flowers in her hair. Desire struck him like a spear. He came to her in secret, cloaking himself in mortal guise, whispering words sweet as honey. Night after night he visited, until her heart belonged wholly to him. When she swelled with child, she believed herself blessed above all mortals. But Hera watched. Hera always watched. The queen of gods descended in disguise, an old woman cloaked in rags. With a tongue sharpened by envy, she whispered doubts into Semele's ear. Is your lover truly Zeus? Or some deceiver playing at divinity? Semele, young and unwise, listened. Hera's words gnawed at her until she could bear them no longer. The next time Zeus came to her bed, she clutched his hand and begged, "Grant me a boon, my lord. Swear by the river Styx that you will not refuse me." Bound by oath, he swore it. "Then show yourself to me," she said, "as you truly are, the king of heaven." Zeus's face fell, but the curse was already moving. He pleaded, he begged her to choose another gift, but she would not relent. At last he revealed himself. Lightning tore the chamber apart, thunder split the night. His true form blazed brighter than 10,000 suns. The mortal body of Semele could not bear it. In an instant she was reduced to ash, her cries vanishing into smoke. Zeus snatched the unborn child from her womb and sewed it into his own thigh, where it grew until it was born again as Dionysus, god of wine and madness. But the joy of that birth could not erase the charred shadow of Semele. The curse had claimed its first victim. If Semele's fate was fire, Io's was chains. Io was a priestess of Hera in Argos, her beauty famed even among mortals. Zeus, gazing down from Olympus, felt desire coil within him. He descended in a veil of mist, drawing her into his arms. But Hera, quick-eyed, swept her gaze upon them. Zeus, desperate to conceal his crime, touched Io and transformed her into a white heifer. Her eyes were wide with terror, her voice stolen, her body bound in animal form. Hera, feigning innocence, demanded the heifer as a gift. Zeus dared not refuse. Hera set Argus Panoptes to guard her, the giant with 100 eyes, who never fully slept. Io wandered, lowing in despair, her once proud spirit broken. Zeus, moved at last to pity, sent Hermes to slay Argus. With a flute and soft words, the trickster lulled the giant to slumber, then cut him down with a flashing blade. Io was freed from her guard, but not from her torment. Hera unleashed a gadfly upon her, stinging her without mercy. She fled across the earth, racing through deserts and mountains, even the sea that would one day bear her name, the Ionian. At last she stumbled into Egypt, her body trembling, her eyes streaming. There Zeus restored her form, and she bore him a son. Yet though she lived, her life was scarred forever by terror and exile. Another thread blackened on the loom. Callisto was a nymph of Artemis, sworn to the virgin huntress's company. She was fleet-footed, her bow swift, her spirit fierce. Zeus, however, disguised himself as Artemis herself, luring Callisto into an embrace. When the truth was revealed, Callisto wept, shamed, and broken. She bore him a son, Arcus. But Artemis, enraged by the broken vow, banished her. Hera, more cruel still, transformed her into a bear, her fur bristling, her voice reduced to growls. For years she roamed the forests, hunted, shunned, her child torn from her arms. When Arcus grew, he came upon his mother in the woods, bow drawn, not knowing the beast before him was she who gave him life. Zeus intervened, sweeping them into the heavens as constellations, Callisto as Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Arcus as Ursa Minor. It was said he saved them. But Callisto's tears of exile burned forever across the night sky. And so it was with many others. Europa carried across the sea by a bull's back. Leda, broken beneath the wings of a swan. Countless maidens whose names faded, but whose grief stained the golden thread. Each love began in fire and ended in ruin. Each passion, a curse disguised as desire. And though Zeus still boasted, still drank nectar and laughed with thunder, the Moirai's shadow lengthened. Hera's eyes never left him. The curse had begun its true work. If the fates had woven sorrow into Zeus's thread, they had given the shears into Hera's hand. For none knew how to wound the thunderer more deeply than his queen. She was not blind to his betrayals. Every whisper of mortal beauty, every cry of a nymph in despair, reached her ear. She saw the trails of thunderclouds that marked his passing, smelled the storm in the air when he left Olympus in secrecy. And each time, her heart hardened like iron. But Hera was no mere victim of his wandering lust. She was queen of the gods, daughter of Cronus, sister and consort of the Thunderer. Her throne stood beside his, her crown no less radiant. She could not strike him with lightning, but she could wound him where he least expected, through those he loved, and through the loyalty of Olympus itself. When Zeus's passions fell upon Semele, it was Hera who came veiled as an old crone, whispering poison into the maiden's ear until she begged for her death. When Io fled across the earth, Hera alone had loosed the gadfly, a torment no thunderbolt could kill. When Callisto wandered the woods in shame, Hera turned her fur black and her voice to a growl, ensuring she would never again be embraced as kin. It was said that the fates cursed Zeus, but Hera carried out their will with her own hand. Each wound she inflicted deepened his guilt, though he never confessed it aloud. For all his might, he could not shield his loves from her vengeance. And Hera's wrath did not stop at mortals. There came a time when even the gods themselves grew weary of Zeus's rule. His temper was quick, his punishments harsh, his arrogance unbearable. Hera whispered among them, sowing seeds of rebellion. Poseidon, proud lord of the seas, bristled at always standing second. Athena, though born of Zeus's own head, resented his tyranny and longed to shape Olympus with her wisdom. Apollo, radiant archer, desired a freer reign. And Hera bound them together with her words. One night, when Zeus lay heavy with wine and nectar, they struck. Hera bound him in chains while he slept, cords forged from unbreakable adamant. Poseidon fastened the knots, Athena placed her spear at his throat, Apollo stood ready with his bow. For a moment, the King of Heaven lay captive, his thunderbolts beyond reach. The council trembled. But rebellion cannot bind thunder forever. Thetis, a sea goddess unnoticed in the plotting, fled to Briareus, one of the 100-handed giants Zeus had freed from Tartarus. The giant stormed Olympus, his 100 arms tearing through the chains, his 100 fists scattering the rebels. Zeus rose, his wrath like a storm breaking over the world. The walls of Olympus shook, the seas rose, the earth cracked. Poseidon bent his knee, Apollo turned his face away, Athena lowered her eyes. But Hera he seized by the wrists. He hung her in chains from the sky itself. An anvil was fastened to each of her feet, her arms spread wide, her cries echoing across the heavens. The other gods trembled, but none dared free her. For a full day and night she hung in torment, her tears falling as rain upon the earth. At last, Zeus released her, but her defiance was never extinguished. From that day, their marriage was not one of love, but of endless strife, two thrones side by side, yet always at war. It was then that the Moirai smiled over their loom. For the curse upon Zeus was not death, it was endurance. His throne would never fall, but it would never bring him peace. Every child he sired would bring strife. Every lover he touched would suffer. Every oath of loyalty would turn to rebellion. His own queen, his own kin, his own blood, none would give him rest. And yet, bound by pride, Zeus never yielded. He tightened his grip upon Olympus, striking fear where love had failed. The thunder rolled on. But beneath it, the curse grew heavier. The skies above Olympus were bright with lightning, but within the king's heart, a storm darker than night had begun to stir. For whispers had reached him, whispers of prophecy. The gods murmured in their halls, the nymphs whispered in their groves, the titans in their chains muttered in their prisons. One day, one of Zeus's children shall surpass him. He could not ignore it. Not even the Lord of Thunder could silence the voice of fate. And so Zeus descended to Delphi, where the great temple of Apollo rose upon the slopes of Mount Parnassus. Mortals and kings had walked its marble steps in trembling awe, but never before had the heaven's own ruler come in such desperation. The Pythia awaited him in the temple's inner chamber, seated upon her golden tripod above the fissure that breathed the vapors of prophecy. Her hair hung in dark tangles, her eyes rolled white, her lips trembled with the breath of the god. Though Apollo was his son, even Zeus bowed his head to the sacred frenzy of his oracle. "Speak," Zeus commanded, his voice like a storm pressing against the walls. "Tell me of the curse that dogs my throne. Tell me of this child who would unseat me." The Pythia's voice was no longer her own. It came low and hissing, then high and shrill, like a chorus of voices echoing from deep within the earth. "King of thunder, Lord of the sky, the thread you boast unravels nigh. Not Titan's chain nor mortal spear, but blood of your blood shall draw you near. Beware the child whose strength is flame. Beware the son who bears your name. From womb or head or mortal womb, your throne shall tremble, shake, and gloom. You shall not fall, yet never rest. The curse shall strike through what you love best. Eternal reign, eternal strife. Thunder without peace is the price of life." The voice broke, and the Pythia collapsed, shuddering, her mouth foaming. Priests rushed to her aid, but Zeus heard only the echo of her riddle. Not fall, not die, but tremble, always tremble. His throne eternal, but never secure. Fear, the one emotion the thunderer despised, coiled within his chest. It was the same fear his father Cronos once knew, the fear that had driven the Titan to swallow his own children. And Zeus remembered how he had risen from that doom, how he had torn free and cast Cronos down. Could the same fate await him? He vowed it would not. From that day, every birth was watched, every prophecy studied, every womb weighed against the riddle of Delphi. When Metis, the goddess of wisdom, swelled with his child, Zeus remembered the oracle. "Beware the sun," it had said. He tricked her, swallowed her whole, and carried her within him. Yet from his own skull Athena burst forth, armed and shining, a goddess born not of mother but of father. When Hera bore him Hephaestus, crippled and lame, Zeus cast the child down from Olympus in disgust, fearing weakness could yet turn to wrath. When mortals carried his children, he cloaked them in storms, hid them in caves, or hunted them with Hera's vengeance. Yet no matter what he did, they rose. Apollo, shining archer. Artemis, huntress of the wild. Hermes, sly and swift. Dionysus, mad and divine. Heracles, strongest of men. Each child bore power. Each child bore rebellion. Each child drew the curse tighter around him. And still the Moirai wove. Their shadows fell upon the golden thread, unbroken yet ever darkening. Clotho whispered, "He shall never fall." Lachesis murmured, "He shall never rest." Atropos smiled, her shears unused. For the curse was not death. The curse was forever. And Zeus, who once boasted of his eternal reign, began to understand that eternity was not a gift, but a sentence. The oracle's words haunted him. "Not Titan's chain nor mortal spear, but blood of your blood shall draw you near." And so it was. For one by one, Zeus's children rose not as obedient heirs, but as challengers, rivals, and reminders of the curse the Moirai had spun into his fate. She came not from a mother's womb, but from his skull. When Metis swelled with child, Zeus remembered the prophecy, that her offspring would surpass him. He tricked her, swallowed her whole, and thought the threat ended. But in time, his head blazed with pain. His cries shook Olympus. At last Hephaestus cleaved his skull with an axe, and from it leapt Athena, radiant, armored, her spear gleaming, her eyes bright with wisdom. The hall of gods rang with awe. But Zeus looked upon her with unease. She had come from him, yet she was not his to command. Athena counseled the gods with wisdom beyond his pride, and mortals built cities in her honor. She stood beside him in counsel, yet often against him in thought. She loved justice more than his thunder, and strategy more than his storms. And though she bent her knee, her gaze was always level with his. In Athena, the curse spoke clearly, a child born to rival, not to obey. From the mortal Leto came twins, Artemis the huntress, Apollo the radiant. Hera, mad with jealousy, hounded their mother from land to land, forbidding any place under the sun to give her rest. Only the floating isle of Delos received her, and there she bore her children. Apollo grew golden, swift with bow and lyre, his arrows bringing plague and death as easily as music. He became god of prophecy, the very voice of Delphi that whispered Zeus's doom. What greater defiance could a son bear, than to speak aloud the curse that shackled his father? Mortals turned to Apollo's shrine for truth, not to Zeus's thunder for law. His temple spread farther, his song sweeter, his light sometimes brighter than the lightning of Olympus. Zeus loved him, yet feared him, for Apollo's tongue carried the Moirai's breath. From Semele's ashes came Dionysus, born of Zeus's thigh, a child of fire and madness. Hera hated him most of all. She sent madness upon his nurses, drove him wandering across the earth, hounded him from land to land. But wherever he went, he brought wild ecstasy. Vines split the earth at his step, wine flowed, mortals abandoned their homes to join his revels. Kings who resisted him fell, their thrones overturned by mobs of women in frenzy. Dionysus returned to Olympus crowned in ivy, followed by satyrs and maenads, the wild host of his worship. Zeus welcomed him as son, but his throne shook beneath the madness that Dionysus carried. For the god of wine brought rebellion not only to men, but to the very order of Olympus. The curse laughed in his wine. But none bore the mark of defiance like Heracles. Born of a mortal woman, Alcmene, he was Zeus's pride, the strongest of men. Yet Hera's hatred pursued him from the cradle. She sent serpents to strangle him as an infant, but he crushed them in his fists. She drove him into madness, and in his frenzy he slew his own wife and children. For his penance, He performed 12 labors, each greater than the last, slaying the Nemean lion, capturing Cerberus from the underworld, holding the heavens on his shoulders. With each trial he grew stronger, his fame spreading across the earth until mortals whispered, "Heracles is greater than the gods themselves." At last he died in torment, his mortal body consumed by poison blood. But Zeus, unable to lose him, raised him to Olympus, granting him immortality. And so it came to pass that Heracles, once a mortal, sat among the gods, his seat carved beside Zeus's own, his strength equal to thunder. What father could see his son grow so mighty without trembling? What king could share his throne without dread? Athena with her wisdom, Apollo with his prophecy, Dionysus with his frenzy, Heracles with his strength, each child bore a fragment of the curse. Zeus had sought heirs, but the fates gave him rivals. He had sought loyalty, but his children became voices of defiance. He had sought to bind eternity, but eternity itself twisted against him. And still the Moirai wove. The golden thread gleamed, unbroken, yet now wrapped in darkness, each turn binding Zeus not to triumph but to torment. His throne endured, yes, but it endured in unrest. 1,000 years passed. Then another 1,000. And still the lightning crowned Olympus. Mortals rose and fell, empires blossomed and withered, their kings prayed, fought, and died beneath the shadow of the thunderer's throne. Yet Zeus remained. His beard turned no whiter, his hand no weaker. His storm never dimmed, his thunderbolt never failed. Time slid past him like water over stone. He was eternal, and he was weary. There are burdens only gods can know. Mortals envy immortality, but they do not see its shadow. They live, they suffer, they die, and in death find release. But the gods cannot die. Zeus sat upon his throne and watched as mortal lovers withered, their children turning to dust, their cities sinking into sand. He had sired sons who had fought like lions, but they all faded into shades in Hades' halls. He had taken queens whose beauty outshone the dawn, but their faces grew hollow, their voices stilled. He was king of the living, but surrounded by ghosts. And even among the immortals, the curse gnawed. His children on Olympus were strong, radiant, and untouchable, but always restless, always defiant, always shadows of the prophecy that no lightning could burn away. The thunderer, once drunk on victory, now drank only to forget. The other Olympians looked upon mortals with longing. They envied their brief flames, their passionate lives, their power to change swiftly and end cleanly. Athena whispered that mortality was a gift. Apollo sang of men who burned brightly and died young. Dionysus wept in drunken frenzy, wishing for an end he could never find. Even Hera, who shared eternity with Zeus, sometimes turned her eyes to the earth and envied the peace of mortal graves. But Zeus, he alone could not escape. For he was the pillar of Olympus, the storm that kept the order of the world. If he fell, the heavens themselves would collapse. Thus the curse bound him not only to life, but to duty. He was eternal king, eternal warden, eternal prisoner of his own power. And so the thunderer dreamed. He dreamed of walking among men as a stranger, with no crown, no scepter, no lightning in his hand. He dreamed of a mortal woman who would not wither in his arms, of children who would not grow to challenge him, of laughter unshadowed by Hera's wrath. He dreamed of death, not as defeat, but as release. A soft darkness where no thunder was needed, where no curse could follow. But each time he woke, the crown still burned upon his head, and the storm still roared within his chest. The Moirai's work was perfect. He could not fall, nor fade, nor flee. He could not die, nor could he rest. He would sit forever upon Olympus, his hand clenched around the thunderbolt, his throne unshaken yet forever trembling. Kings envied him. Mortals prayed to him. Gods feared him. But in his own heart, Zeus knew the truth. His curse was not weakness. His curse was endurance. The weight of eternity pressed heavier than any titan's chain. And though he had once laughed that his throne would never fall, now he understood the cruelty of such a fate. For what is eternity, if not a cage? The centuries marched on, silent as shadows, relentless as waves. Empires rose and fell, temples crumbled, and new gods were named by mortals who forgot the old. But still, upon Olympus, the storm sat crowned. Zeus endured. The thunderbolt never dimmed, the throne never cracked. His face, carved in power, remained untouchable, his voice still shook the mountains. To mortals, he was ageless. To gods, he was inevitable. To himself, he was a prisoner. It was whispered that one day, when the last mortal heart ceased to beat, when the last prayer was spoken and the earth itself grew cold, Zeus would remain, alone in the endless dark. No rival would come. No rebellion would rise. No thunder would answer his call. Only silence. For what is a king, when there is no one left to rule? Now the truth was clear. The curse had never been a single act of vengeance, nor the punishment of one enemy or one god slighted. It was the law of fate itself. The King of Heaven must never fall, for if he fell, so would all creation. And so Zeus was bound, not to triumph, but to endurance. His curse was not to be broken, not to be slain, not to be defeated, but to rule forever, long after crown and throne had turned to ash in the minds of men. In the silent hours, when even Olympus grew still, Zeus would close his eyes and imagine laying down his crown. He would imagine walking into the halls of Hades, shoulder to shoulder with the sons he had buried, the wives who had faded, the mortals who had once called his name. But when he opened his eyes, the throne still burned, and the storm still crackled within his chest. The eternal king could never leave his post. The eternal king could never rest. The eternal king could never die. And so it is told. Fear not the thunder, nor the lightning. Fear not the wrath of kings or the ruin of gods. Fear instead the weight of eternity. For even Zeus, crowned in storm, was not spared its chains. For what greater curse can there be than to live forever? And so the tale lingers like thunder across the mountains. If even the king of the gods could not escape fate's loom, what hope have we, who walk the earth beneath his storm? If you enjoy mythical tales, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales that were never meant to be forgotten.